Have you ever met a leader who's clearly convinced they're the star of the show? Like everything in the organization somehow circles back to them? That's main character syndrome. And while it might get likes on social media, it's poison for real leadership. Because real leadership isn't about being the hero of the story. It's about writing a story that others want to be a part of. So today we're talking about how main character syndrome creeps into leadership, how to spot it, and how to build a leadership story that actually works. I'll be honest, I've struggled with main character syndrome. Not just thinking I was the main character in my story, but thinking I was the main character in everyone's story. As a young leader in my early 20s, I was obsessed with saying the right things to impress the right people. I made selfish decisions, not because I was trying to hurt anyone, but because I was constantly asking, what's in it for me? Or even worse, how can I create the perfect image of myself? I believed that I could just project this polished, put together version of who I wanted people to think I was, and I'd be a better leader. But the truth, that mindset crumbles fast. It didn't take long before I got humbled. I realized no one wants to follow perfection. They follow authenticity. And what I thought would make me look like a leader was actually driving people away. Because when leadership is all about you, it ends up tearing people down instead of building them up. That was a turning point for me. I had to learn that leadership isn't about curating a personal brand. It's about building trust. And that only happens when you're willing to be real, flaws and all. So here are 3 ways that leaders fall into main character syndrome. The first way is by mistaking visibility for value. You start to believe your value as a leader is tied to how visible you are. If you're not speaking, posting, being seen, you feel like you're not leading, but that's a dangerous trap. Just like a King Saul in the Bible. In 1 Samuel, Saul disobeys God's command during battle. Instead of destroying everything as instructed, he spares the best livestock and the opposing king. When Samuel calls him out, Saul's response isn't one of repentance, it's image control. He says, "Please honor me before the elders." He wants to look like a leader more than he wants to lead well. And that's main character syndrome in its raw form, leading for appearance instead of the mission. The second way that leaders can fall into this trap is by taking credit instead of creating space. This shows up when leaders hoard credit. So leaders with main character syndrome believe that if they're not the one with the win, it doesn't count. So they start subtly inserting themselves into team victories, even when they weren't the driving force. The perfect example of this is Michael Scott from The Office. Michael is so desperate to be the star, always cracking jokes, interrupting meetings, forcing himself into every major moment. And yet, his branch outperforms others. Why? Because occasionally, accidentally or not, Michael gets out of the way and lets his team lead. Think about when Jim and Pam design the pitch that lands a huge client. Michael doesn't take over, he lets them run with it. Or when Dwight, despite being intense and awkward, is clearly the best salesman in the company. Michael might get jealous, but he still lets Dwight lead deals, represent the team, and close sales. Michael's best leadership moments are when he steps back and becomes the glue, not the spotlight. You don't always need to be the one with the idea, the answer, or the credit. Sometimes your most powerful move is setting the stage, not stealing it. And the third way this crops up is by confusing your story with the story. Main character syndrome shows up when leaders think their personal narrative is the only one that matters. Take Blockbuster. They had the market cornered. Everyone rented from them. But when the world began to shift to digital streaming, they clung to their story. We've always done it this way. But when the world began shifting to digital streaming, they continued to cling to their story, which was, we've always done it this way. Netflix even offered to partner, but Blockbuster's leadership didn't take it seriously. They were too busy preserving their version of the story. That failure to adapt because they believed their narrative was the narrative led to their collapse. We see this in leadership all the time. Leaders get stuck in their version of how things should work, stop listening to others, and miss where the story is really heading. When you make your personal journey the center of everything, you lose the ability to see the bigger picture and take your people with you. Here's a simple 4-part framework I call the supporting cast model, because the best leaders think less like the stars and more like the directors. So step 1 is spotlight awareness. Know when to hand the mic to someone else. Empower your team to lead, speak, present, and shine. Step 2, curiosity over control. Instead of always steering the ship, ask more questions. Stay open. Great leaders are great learners. Step 3, acknowledge the ensemble. Celebrate wins loudly, but make sure they're about the team. Name names and make recognition a culture. And step 4, tell the bigger story. Remind yourself and your team often, this isn't about you. It's about the mission, the people, and the impact. So let's bring this all together. Main character syndrome sneaks in when we crave attention more than we crave value. It thrives when we hoard credit instead of building trust. It takes over when we forget that our story isn't the story. But when you lead like a supporting cast member, you free your team to become stars in their own right. And that's when the real story takes off. So, what about you? Have you ever caught yourself slipping into the main character syndrome? What helped you come back to center? Drop your stories or your takeaways in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you're navigating this. And if this episode gave you something to think about, would you do me a favor? Like this video, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. We're building a space for real leaders to grow, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. So thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.